The Roman gods hate me. Have you ever been hated by an entire pantheon of gods? It's unpleasant to say the least. And there is one god in particular who has it out for me. This guy, mate. His name is Pluto. Or is it? That's a bit of foreshadowing for the entire issue. Long story less long, I have a main channel that talks about fictional pirates. As part of said fictional world, there are a series of really big, bad, weapony things that are all named after Greek gods. Poseidon, Uranus, and Pluton. And the problem is, well, you may have noticed what the problem is, because there's a lot of controversy surrounding these names. Every time I bring them up, I get confronted with hundreds of comments like so. Pluton is a Roman god. Pluto is also a Roman god. The Greek version is Hades. Pluto and Uranus are Roman gods. Did you really try and say people would think Poseidon was Roman when Pluto is a Roman god? Pluton is a Roman god. Actually, Pluton is a Roman god. The Greek equivalent is Hades. Pluton is Roman though. His Greek equivalent is Hades. And you know, turns out people get like real smug when it comes to their knowledge of the Greek and Roman gods. And with the sheer quantity of comments that gets dumped on me, you would think that something like this is fairly basic common knowledge, which I find quite fun when these hundreds of people are wrong. So let's examine this for a bit. The claim here is that Pluto is the Roman counterpart for the Greek Hades. Excellent. So let's clarify this by doing a bit of research on the old Wikipedia. Here we have the entry for Pluto, and its first line says, in ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pluto, Greek, was the ruler of the Greek underworld. Now, to be fair, it only says the word Greek 3 times in that first sentence. And everyone knows you need that 4th time to really hammer the information in. But it's just so weird that everyone, actually's me, insisting that Pluto is Roman when the dude is as Greek as a souvlaki. In before someone in the comments accuses souvlaki of being Roman as well. Now, to be fair, Greek and Roman mythology, it's a bit of a mess. And Pluto is also a Roman god. One plagiarized directly from the Greek Pluto. And the Roman gods, mate, these gods, they hate it when I say that. I can sense their ire on me right now, and I anticipate being smote at any moment. But until that happens, I'm gonna say more things. Because I don't mind being actually when I'm actually wrong. I mean, just like the Greek and Roman gods, I make mistakes all the time. But come on, guys, like if you're gonna correct me, then at least do a bit of a double check. Because meanwhile, there were also claims that Uranus was not a Greek god. So you know what, let's do a bit of the old research and check his Wikipedia page. Here it is, and the first line says, in Greek mythology, Uranus, sometimes written Ouranos, that's funky, is the personification of the sky and one of the Greek primordial deities. Greek is literally the second word. And I actually really like how this article has the correct way to pronounce Uranus, which is apparently Uranus, which is really fun to say, but still really Greek. So with this in mind, I needed a way to effectively respond to these hundreds of comments of people calling me out. And I guess I could sit there and just reply to them all one by one, and actually I did for a few of them, a few very lucky people, but that's not quite gonna cut it. So I decided to make a glorious pinned comment. Alright guys, I really didn't want to have to do this, but for everyone pointing out that Pluto is a Roman god, you're right, but also very wrong. In Greek mythology, Hades went on to become known as Pluto. So Pluto isn't the Roman version of Hades, Pluto is the Roman version of Pluto. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Now please stop commenting. To be clear, the reason why I care about commenting is because it clogs up my comment feed. When I read comments, I want to be able to engage and take in as much information as possible that you guys are dumping upon me. But if every second comment is about Pluto being a Roman god, then there's nothing to really take in. In any case, I thought this was a great way to solve things. I was wrong. I was very wrong. And the first clapback came from a user named Gichi Winuk, who said, source, to which I replied, source is ancient Greece. And Will M went on to say, can't wait for your dude in a room video about this, which turns out it was a pretty good prediction. I wasn't planning on making a video about this because everything we've set up until now, yeah, it's mildly annoying, but look, it's no big deal. Stuff like this happens all the time. But what happens next is where things get real good, because not everyone was content with my TED Talk. Wikipedia is not a good source. You can't use it in school, and that's true, but we're not in school. We are in the YouTube comments section where I can use whatever I like. And mate, if Wikipedia is wrong about both Pluto and Uranus being Greek, then I don't know, humanity is just doomed. I mean, to think that someone hasn't corrected such a glaring error. Because judging by how quickly people jump on me, surely some historian would be salivating at the opportunity to actually the Wikipedia article about a god. And actually it's even worse because someone went to the effort to make up fake ancient Greek names for these alleged Roman gods. And I should also say that there's a good argument to be made that the academic and educational establishment rejected Wikipedia because it was new and new things frighten them. That's why so much of academia chooses to look backwards and study history. It's kind of in the same vein as how traditional media looks down upon YouTubers. Fun tangent here. My main channel gets more views than any mainstream Australian news YouTube channel. Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10, all of them. More people watch me, dude in room, than they do the Australian mainstream news on YouTube. But I digress. The point is that Wikipedia is fine because you're forced to cite your sources down at the bottom. And in any case, it is only now that we meet the true villain of this video. This guy's name is Shinken, and this conversation is about to turn into a clash of the titans. Pluto is the Roman term. Nobody is very wrong but you. Accept and cope with the BS you came up with. Even Wikipedia states he's known as Pluto. ... by the Romans, with lore by the Romans trying to tie it in. Greek myths don't have an official lore Bible, nor some episode where he changes name. How can you double down in brainlessness? A perfectly reasonable response from a very well-balanced individual, I'm sure. But he continues. What's Chad about distorting basic reading comprehension? Hades became known as Pluto by the Romans. How can you be so illiterate to not know this? And even distort basic reading of an article? Ameriburger education. Right, so a couple of things here. One, not American. Anyone with ears knows that because I don't speak with a yeehaw or an arm walk in here sort of thing that you guys do. So obviously not American. And two, I was labeled as illiterate and accused of distorting basic reading of an article. And look, maybe Shinken is right. Maybe I've come to some sort of distorted conclusion of Pluto being Greek. So you know what? I'm going to practice my reading and double check the article. In ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pluto, Greek, was the ruler of the Greek underworld. So with that in mind, I'm still pretty sure that Pluto is Greek. In fact, the first mention of the word Roman in the article is the following. Pluto's Roman equivalent is Disparta. Intriguing. A bit weird to know that Pluto's Roman equivalent isn't, Pluto. Except it is, because Pluto exists in both, but you get what I mean. Unless you're Shinken. Because Shinken's outrage was far from quelled by this information. Pluto is the Roman term. Nobody is very wrong but you. Accept and cope with the BS you came up with. And if you think this sounds familiar, it's because it is. Because he literally posted the exact same comment again, word for word. Which I remind you ended with, how can you double down in brainlessness? I'm starting to think that we have a bit of a Roman sympathizer on our hands here, which is it's not a good look, Shinken. Not a good look. And it's a shame because he also mentions that there's no episode where Pluto changes name, or I guess Hades changes name. And that's a real shame because I think Greek mythology should have an anime. Because if it did, there would definitely be an episode that addresses that Hades goes on to become known as Pluto. As far as I understand it, it's because Hades was not, a socially acceptable god to pray to due to being the lord of the underworld. And so he also took on the name of Pluto, became the god of wealth as well, so that people could pray in peace to their underworld lord. But look, mythology buffs were having none of Shinken shit. And Connor Scanlon replied to this by saying, the Romans adopted the name Pluto from a late euphemism that the Greeks developed for Hades, according to William Hanson's 2005 book on Greco-Roman mythology. In fact, the form Pluton first appears during the classical era of Hellenistic Greece, transforming as words tend to do, and Plato asserted that Hades preferred this title. Mate, Connor is such a Chad. He cited his source mid-argument in a YouTube comment. This is like the equivalent of unzipping your pants, whipping out your man bits, and then slapping your opponent across the face with what I am certain is a massive. And look, Shinken pulled a bit of a Joe here and chose not to reply to this, instead starting a new argument in a completely separate thread. You should apologize to the people you lied about the Greek and Roman gods, since you distorted what they said to pretend Hades is not Pluto to Romans, but instead some pre-Roman name changed. Cause Grifter doesn't know how myths and cultures work. All to not grasp they simply have variants of the planet's names. Even though the correlation between Roman and Greek names is universally with one L, known including by then. What? Known including by then? Down to being clownishly arrogant about pretending Neptune isn't a Poseidon equivalent, or failing basic reading to pretend Hades' change doesn't correlate to Roman culture over the region. 0 out of 10. No wonder you have a bad rep elsewhere. cannot believe he gave me a 0 out of 10. What a twatlord. And I also can't believe that he seems to have some sort of moral objection to using full stops to separate sentences. That was legitimately hard to read. Not because he's a moron, but because there's no grammar, which I find ironic from someone calling me illiterate. But you know what? Maybe Shinken is still correct. So you know what we're gonna do? We are going to check again. Maybe Shinken is right, and I do deserve my bad rep elsewhere. I imagine that elsewhere is Twitter and or Reddit. But you know what? Fine. Let's read Pluton's article one more time. And I'll do it slowly as well to reflect my illiterate nature. In ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pluto, Greek, was the ruler of the Greek underworld. But you know what? I'm feeling pretty confident in my reading skills now, so we're going to continue just a little bit further this time. Pluton, as the name of the ruler of the underworld, first appears in Greek literature of the classical period. Ah yes, the classical period. You know, the one between 4th and 5th century BC. The one that was happening 400 to 500 years before Roman mythology even began. And even when that mythology did begin, all it did was plagiarize Greek mythology anyway. There would be no Roman mythology without Greek mythology. And I know the Roman gods, they get furious when I say that. But it's true, and you're not gonna stop me from telling it how it is. Each and every one of the Roman gods are frauds, and so is everyone who supports them. But the moral of the story is that even when you think you're right, maybe just double check anyway. Before you accuse someone else of being an illiterate swine, just make sure that you yourself are not currently in the sty. Because the internet, it is available. It's quite possibly the greatest tool ever invented by humanity, and yet still very few people seem to make use of it.